How about the Detroit Lions? All of a sudden, they win a playoff game. They think they can, skirt around the rules. They think they can just, bang each other up in practice during OTAs the week of May 27th. And next thing you know, they can just get away with it. Not so fast, says the NFL. They lost their final OTA practice. They had to forfeit it because there was too much contact at practice during that week of May 27th. So my question is, who's the rat, right? Who reported this to the PA or the league to get them in trouble?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Who's the snake?
Could this also be what divides their locker room and ruins the season for the Lions?
Lee, can we tweet that out?
Let's
tweet that. That'll be the headline.
Could this be it?
Mutiny.
Ooh.
That'll be the headline.
Anarchy.
This is really common, by the way, as far as teams get popped for being too physical in OTAs. When I was with the Seahawks in 2013, they basically planned on it. I mean, that's how – I'm not going to say the offseason's meaningless because it's not for younger players. It's not for new players, guys coming back from injury. But there's a thought because it's not in pads that they really can't get the work done they'd like to get done. And, old school guys, I think Dan Campbell falls in that category. I think he's an old school guy with – maybe in some ways a new school approach, but do you remember the clip we saw of him talking to the team about hitting and talking to – it was during training camp, I believe before last season. And he was just asking the guys to trust him and trust him. And he was basically pleading with them because, he doesn't want to put people at risk, but in order to practice what you're going to do in your actual job in a game, you got to hit, you got to bang. There's a lot of coaches who feel like that. And so if they end up being too physical, so be it. Well, to take away one of our OTAs. I remember, I think half the time a lot of the teams do something silly anyways. They go to a movie or they're going to play like a softball game or something. It's like we look at it as team building, but the truth of the matter is OTAs don't allow you to truly practice what the sport is. It's why, you can get a lot of work done in 7-on-7, and people say, these 7-on-7 leagues, man, they're awesome. No, they're not. It's 7-on-7. It's not football. That for a quarterback, that's not even football. Getting up to the line of scrimmage, every single play, having the opportunity to get your head knocked off, but still having to throw the football, that is football. That is what that is about. And so it's to me, I every time I see a team do this, I'm like, good. That team's going to have a good year. Because they're setting the tone early on what their team's going to be, what their identity is going to be. And he said it from his opening press conference. They're going to bite off your kneecaps. They're going to be a physical football team. This probably should happen more than it does. But I'm glad to hear for the Lions. I think they've got a tone there set, not allowing themselves to look at last year's success and read too much into that. So I love this news coming out of Detroit.
It just continues, as you mentioned, it just continues the theme that Dan Campbell is pushing for, that they ain't effing around. And not only is it something that you definitely – I remember being under Greg Williams, and there's a lot of things I could say I didn't like about Greg Williams, but one of the few things that I can say I did like about him is – he had a we don't F around mentality. And we want that to be the reputation, and we want that to be what resonates from our camp. So this is like what they're doing is they're taking a punishment, but they're putting everybody in the NFL. They're putting them on notice. All the other teams, they're putting them on notice. All the NFC North teams, you're on notice. We're about to come kick your ass. All the other NFC teams, we're going to come out of the NFC this year. We're going to kick your ass. We're not joking around. We're not playing around. This was not a fluke. The Detroit Lions is a team that you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to have to deal with the fact that we're doing it our way, and it's in a way that, in a lot of ways, you mentioned 7-on-7, the old guard, the old style of how people play when Dan Campbell was a player is vastly different. It's evolved from then to now as to how things are done, how they're seen, how they're interpreted. And I'll say this, the one thing that I love the most about Harbaugh in Michigan this past college year is that you take a guy that brought old school rules and old school principles and a new school style of how things are done, and he basically proved that the old way of doing things, in some ways, in some regards, may be obsolete. But there's one thing that will never, ever, ever, unless it's governed out of the game, is the physicality of the sport. You saw a Michigan team basically bully their way to a national championship. You've watched the Detroit Lions continue to grow in the style of bully ball, bully football. I love it. And
old
for somebody
is in.
who
Old is back. Old is back.
I don't know that it's back, but I do know this. I do know the people that I know.
Jonas is going to try to lean way too hard into that.
Yeah, he's not old enough to even say that.
Well, listen, it's like when you see all these teams going to their retro jerseys now. All right, bringing back the throwbacks.
But that's just for a look. Is that just more so for a look? That's because if you really were bringing them back to be old school, then you would just bring them back.
Brady told me one time, he said, it's not a
Brady
look.
told me.
It's a way of life.
Oh, okay.
His words exactly. So
that'd be $10.
$10.
Yes, that was passive aggressive.
That's not passive aggressive.
Yes, it was.
First off, this is some kangaroo court here. We don't have a fine system. No one ever paid up. I donated 1 month. I think Jonas may have donated. I never saw the receipt. That's all I'll say.
All right, it's because it didn't exist.
I never say anything that gets me fined. So
that is 100% false.
You should be fined more than anybody.
That's 100%
Washington
false.
stinks.
Damn.
Jonas, though, went off.
I love Washington. He
went off on an old school tangent for a long, long time. That was like, you could tell Jonas is just born in the wrong era.
Old is back. I'm a throwback. You
should have been born in the 50s. Yeah.
An old soul.
You know what?
Through the 80s
in
and
a
90s.
lot of ways, because that leather jacket that you wear is definitely old school, boy. Like real John Travolta, real, like T-birds. Like all you got to do is spray paint T-birds on the back, going prowling, like a T-bird.
I'm one of the outsiders, with Pony Boy Curtis.
T-bird tonight.
Let me ask you this: what is considered too much contact in practice? Are they lighting people up?
It's a great question.
Is it bull in the ring? Is it Oklahoma drills? What are we looking at when it comes to too much contact in practice?
It's by interpretation, I would assume.
Yeah. I would assume.
I love how vague that was. It's by interpretation.
Yeah.
So you're saying if someone's out there, they're just like, oh, that looks too physical.
Yes. How do you measure it? How you think?
There really isn't supposed to be any contact, so I would assume there's still elements of one-on-ones that go on with linemen. There's still elements of one-on-ones that go on with DBs, wide receivers, and linebackers, running backs. And even in 7-on-7 or team periods, there'll be spots where guys are kind of almost hitting one another a little bit. I remember even in a walkthrough we had back in 2013, it was like full speed. It started out as a walkthrough, but then it was like a 2-minute drill, which maybe this was the genius of Pete Carroll. Is he knew it couldn't how can you do a hurry up offense in 2 minutes? How could you do that in slow motion? It's impossible to do it in a walkthrough fashion against the defense. So obviously one side started to speed up, and then the other side speeds up, then the other side speeds up, then the other side speeds up because it gets competitive. So guys are full blown, getting jammed at the line of scrimmage. They're like using hands, and just the whole thing. There's all of a sudden a pass rush. You're like, what is happening?
It's 100% the team period where it's going to get that you're going to get that notification.
Honestly,
100%.
though, sometimes it's not even the NFL, and players have said this for a long time, who are a player rep, is they feel like they're in a position where they can't win because everyone knows who the player reps are. And if you end up losing a practice, they squarely turn over and look at that player. And they're like, oh, you're ratting us out, huh? Okay. All right. We'll see how that play time incentive looks this year. Or maybe they cut them all together.